we're going to grant permission to Westwood Media Center to live stream and record the meeting. Is there anyone else who would like to record the meeting? Okay, great. So we are going to have several guests with us this evening. This is our first public hearing. So we did talk a little bit about that last week, what a public hearing means, what we're going to do tonight. So this is our first public hearing. So I want to welcome Mr. Peter Iddick, who's a resident, who is here before us to discuss the citizen petition articles. Chris Coleman, Town Administrator, Pam Dukeman, Mike Walsh, and Patrick Ahern, Town Council, who are here with us tonight to discuss the Select Board articles. And Abby McCabe and Chris Paff, who are here with us tonight to discuss the Planning Board articles. So welcome to all of you. We are very happy to have you with us. And we are going to go through the articles in that order. So for me, I want to give you the summary of the Select Board meeting, which happened on Monday night, which we do every meeting. There were a couple of interesting things that I do want to just mention. So the Select Board voted to establish a poet laureate and a teen poet laureate for the town of Westwood. This is, I think, quite amazing. It's going to be funded through the library, and they're putting together a search committee to pick these two individuals. So that's quite exciting. Then there was quite a big discussion about the Gay Street sidewalks. The chair of the Bike and Pedestrian Commission presented before the Select Board. And then there was some discussion about that when they went to the warrant articles. And then one other thing that I want to point out is the Pan Mass Challenge. The kids race is June 12th, 13th annual Kids Pan Mass Challenge. And that is starting at the Martha Jones School. So all great things. And thank you to the Select Board. And then there was one item that came up at the end that I think we will all agree is very sad. Is Pam with us by any chance? She
Yes,
is. I see her.
So is Chris Coleman and Mike Walsh. I had moved them in as well.
Great. So Pam announced her intention to retire. I don't know if the Select Board has accepted her intention to retire, but she did announce her intention to retire in the fall. She's been with the town 31 years, and as folks pointed out, she started before she could even drive. So she's been with the town for quite a while. And so I would like to make a motion to express FinCom's sincere appreciation for the support of Ms. Dukeman over the years to FinCom to help to make our work very doable and accessible, and to thank her for her years of service to the residents of Westwood.
And I will second that motion.
Do we have any discussion on that motion?
Let's first take a roll call to see who's here and establish the meeting.
You're right. We should have done that first, Chris. Jane, you want to take our roll call so we can actually take this motion?
Sure. Bill?
Here.
Jim?
Here.
Lauren?
Here.
Mike?
Here.
Renee?
Here.
George?
Here.
Angela?
Here.
Peter?
Here.
Thank you. Caitlin?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
George L?
Here.
Diane?
Here.
Christina?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
Alex?
Here.
So I made a motion I'm not going to repeat it because I couldn't, because it was off
I
the top of
have it.
my head with my sincere appreciation. And it was seconded. And do we have any discussion on the motion? Raise your hand. George,
Yeah, I will just add to that. I've had the privilege of working with Pam for probably somewhere around 17 to 18 years. And I would just reiterate what Jane said. She is a very intelligent, hardworking representative of this town, and it's been a pleasure working with her. So I personally want to thank Pam and wish her the best. And I know we are going to miss her, but good luck to you, Pam.
Tom,
I'd also like to thank Pam and thank her for her incredible patience when I ask a lot of very mundane questions that would seem very quite simple and basic to her, but she's always great and patient. So thank you, Pam, and best of luck and well deserved.
Renee, I'm pretty sure I saw your hand. Did I?
I was just giving a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations to you. It's wonderful.
Angela,
So I haven't had the pleasure to work with Pam as long as others on the board. But I will say that it has been a pleasure to work with you, Pam, for the short duration that I have. I will say that big shoes to fill. So, we appreciate all the hard work and effort that you put forth and, in making our jobs a lot easier, and, just good luck in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Diane, George Laham and Alex Yale both have hands up.
oh, thank you so much. George,
I just want to thank Pam for a, relatively new member of the committee. Tom kind of stole my thunder again, but your patience and understanding for the newbie questions and, able to actually bring it down to somebody who has not been in public town life and politics or budgets has been incredible. And it's a well-deserved Babson grad deserves a well-deserved retirement.
Alex,
I'll plus one on that. Pam, you were just starting to help me turn my training wheels, and now you're letting me go down the hill. So hopefully somebody who fills your shoes can help be as patient and explain everything as clearly with the context and the history that you have. So thank you, even in a short time. We're gonna miss you.
And Diane, Mike Gay.
Mike,
Yes. So again, Pam, as a fairly new member to FinCom, I had no idea how much work you actually did to be able to answer all of those questions and to go into the depth of detail and to explain really complicated challenges that the town faced for all of the citizens. So since being involved and again, in some other roles as well, you will be a huge loss to the town. And, to wish you the best. I want to figure out if FinCom can block it, but if we can't block it, I want to wish you the very, very best.
maybe she can join FinCom. Where's our moderator? We need to discuss that with our moderator.
I'm not sure about that, Diane.
Oh, come on, Pam.
I do thank you so much for your kind words. It's been a pleasure working with this FinCom and with many, many FinComs over the many years. Really, it's a hallmark of Westwood for a small community. The degree of talent and professionalism that we get for our residents who step up and volunteer on our various boards and in our elected positions. It really is unique to Westwood for a small community. And it really makes a difference in what we do. So thank you all for all your time that you give to the town. And it's a lot of work to step up and we appreciate it. But again, what we see from our residents who step up to volunteer on our boards is amazing. And it's been great. And that makes just a great environment for our staff and our elected officials and our appointed officials. It's really been tremendous. And I think the town has benefited from all of that, from all of us working together. But again, thank you for your kind words. As Diane said, I'm not going to the fall. We have a lot of work between now and then. We got to get through this budget and some other items. And I'll make sure to be working on that with all of you. But thank you.
Let's take a vote. Jane,
We will do. Bill. Bill,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
and Alex.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. There's no way I can express my personal appreciation to you, really. It's just such a pleasure to work with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Okay, and I believe George Hertz may also have something to say. Jane, do you want to bring in?
Yes, I'm doing that right now. Yes, I'm bringing in Abby and I'm going to bring in Nora, and Chris is still with us.
And Chris
So-
Paff, is he with us?
No, Chris Coleman is with us.
Okay,
I brought in Abby and Nora.
okay.
Well, Abby, I just wanted to, we've learned recently that you two are leaving and going to a wonderful new job opportunity in Lexington. And I have watched you just grow tremendously over the last 7 years. And I think Lexington is very, very, very lucky to get you in your new position. And I guess I too will make a motion thanking Abby for her wonderful work over the last 7 years, wishing her the best in her new career. Just, I know that lots of times the planning board meetings themselves are long, they're hard to deal with. The articles are not the easiest for the average citizen, and I think even for members of FinCom, who probably spend more time on them than anybody else to even understand. You've always been very patient, you've always been very gracious. And once again, I say that Lexington is very, very lucky to get you. So best of luck, and it's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Yes, I second.
Okay, and do we have comments on the motion? I want to start, if I can, take the prerogative of Abby, just expressing my sincere appreciation to you and to your support of me personally and of this board, and the amazing work you have done, particularly this year, but every year on the planning board articles, just so impressive. And, we will certainly miss you.
Thank you.
I'm not, oh yeah, Mike, there you
I'll
go.
go. So, yeah, I think Abby, over the years, I've witnessed some meetings that were off the hinge, and you continually take the high road. You've had professionalism. You've been amazing at the planning board meetings. You will be missed. I really dislike how this whole meeting is starting. Like, how did this happen? Like, but no, you're a huge loss, and so yourself and Pam are just such assets to the town. Wish you nothing but the best in Lexington.
Thank you.
Do I see any other hands?
No.
Jane, help me out. No? We ready to go to vote?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Jane.
Bill,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Diane McCarthy,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
and Alex.
Yes.
Another unanimous vote.
Thank you, Abby. All right, so I think I probably did go a little bit out of order, but let's do the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? Everybody, microphone off, so we can all participate, if that's okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Okay, I think we're going to jump right into our public hearing, and our first warrant articles before us will be discussed by Mr. Peter Iddick. Jane, can you unmute Mr. Iddick? Welcome to the meeting.
Good evening. I'm Peter Iddick. I'm a Westwood resident, the sponsor of these articles on senior property tax exemptions that I would like to be able to post. And I'm a member of the Westwood Finance and Warrant Commission. If I may share my screen. Okay. All right. Hopefully you're able to see that. Yes.
Peter.
Yes,
we can
Peter,
see your
we
screen.
can see it.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm perhaps having a problem. Is my screen visible?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
We can all
Peter.
see it.
Yeah, it
Okay,
says
good.
the senior property tax
I'd like to
exemption.
begin by summarizing the senior exemptions issue in Westwood for the benefit of citizens participating in this public hearing, and then respond to some concerns that have been raised about the proposal. A substantial problem for seniors in Westwood is that of gradually becoming house poor. That is to say, their income fails to keep up with inflation, and expenses, including property taxes, cause their budgets to become significantly tighter each year. Many seniors feel that they are being pushed out of their homes. The financial stress on surviving spouses is particularly acute due to the loss of one of the two Social Security pensions. The existing Westwood tax programs for seniors reach only a tiny fraction of the seniors in Westwood. The main program is the Aid to the Elderly and Disabled charity established by the town in 1999, which reports that each year 45 to 55 residents receive assistance, with a typical resident being 87 years old, living in their home for over 50 years. Requirements include means testing on income with a limit of $55,000 per year. Applicants must also have a home value less than the town average, as shown on the application form. The home value requirement alone eliminates about half of the seniors in Westwood. The income limit eliminates more. However, assistance to 45 to 55 residents reaches only a tiny fraction of the over 3,000 seniors in the town. State exemptions accepted by Westwood reach only a few more. One of the main problems is the severity of the means test used for the state exemptions. An individual with $40,000 in an IRA will fail the asset test used for the state exemptions that Westwood accepts. And I would like to post a different item. In 2000, the town proposed to extend a tax break to a larger number of seniors by providing a partial tax exemption for seniors with means testing only on income. The proposed exemption in 2000 did not require a means test on assets, whether on the value of the home or otherwise. This is from 2000. And this is the article 14 from 2000. That proposed senior exemption was proposed by the selectmen, approved by the Finance Commission, and approved by the town meeting in 2000. However, that exemption was never implemented, as it was of a type that was not authorized by the legislature at that time and needed state approval. The legislature never allowed the proposed Westwood exemption specifically, but in 2006, they authorized a very similar option as the clause 41C1/2 exemption. The state offers partial state reimbursement for towns adopting that exemption. Westwood has ignored it. The proposed articles would have Westwood adopt that exemption and keep the promise that was made in 2000. I estimate the exemption to be worth about $2,500 for those eligible in Westwood if fully implemented at the maximum permitted level. The state offers reimbursement of up to $500 for each exemption. This compares favorably with the Westwood Aid to the Elderly and Disabled charity, which offers about $1,800 to recipients with no state reimbursement. The income limits for the clause 41C1/2 exemption are more generous and are the limits used by the state for the so-called senior circuit breaker in the state income tax code. Those limits are adjusted for inflation. The clause 41C1/2 exemption would reach many more seniors in Westwood than are assisted now. The proposed articles would also have Westwood accept the inflation adjustment that is permitted for the option 17D exemption for widows. Westwood accepts that exemption, but granted none under that clause in fiscal year 2020, probably due to severe means testing on assets at 40,000 and the failure to adopt the inflation adjustments that are permitted in clauses 17E and F. I would next like to comment on some concerns that have been raised about this proposal. One objection to the proposal is that it complicates budgeting because the cost depends upon the number of applications and the average home value, and these are not known in advance. One person referred to a possible budgetary nightmare. I contacted the finance director in Ashland about this, where they have adopted the clause 41C1/2 exemption. Their finance director, Brittany Iacopone, replied that it's not a budgetary nightmare. I simply provide the estimated tax levy to the assessor and he takes it from there. The exemption amount is based upon a tentative tax rate and levy, so the exemption amount is estimated until the tax rate is set. Other parts of the budget require estimates, including the number of children in the schools and the revenue from new construction. This should not be a major problem, as indicated by the Ashland finance director. Also, the proposed exemption in 2000 had the same issue concerning the number of applications not known in advance, yet it was approved by the select board and by the finance commission and by the town meeting without an offer of partial state reimbursement. Once the clause 41C1/2 program is implemented, the variation from year to year will probably be small. The first year transition would be eased by the substantial reserves the town has now. Also, the town contribution to the Aid to the Elderly and Disabled charity would no longer be needed or could be scaled back to a smaller amount for the disabled. In the second and subsequent years, it would be much easier to estimate the cost. The proposed increase this year in the town contribution to the Aid to the Elderly and Disabled charity from $50,000 to $300,000 reflects an awareness that there is a serious issue here. However, that proposed increase is for 1 year only, obtains no state reimbursement, and retains difficult means tests. The proposed exemptions will probably pay for themselves over time for two reasons. First, there is partial state reimbursement. More importantly, the exemptions will allow seniors to stay in their homes longer. This saves money for the town because seniors pay property taxes, but are light users of town services and mostly don't have children in the school system, which absorbs most of the Westwood budget. Thus, Westwood benefits by not pushing out the seniors. Another objection is that this should be done by the state and that the governor's budget has proposed an increase in the senior property tax circuit breaker in the income tax code. First, the proposal of Governor Baker is only a proposal from a Republican governor to a Democratic legislature. One newspaper article reported, quote, Baker will face an uphill battle with lawmakers who have historically nixed his prior attempts at tax relief, unquote. More importantly, the state senior circuit breaker in the income tax code has an asset test on home assessed value that Westwood seniors will mostly fail, since Westwood assessed values are relatively high in comparison with state averages. Thus, few residents in Westwood would benefit even if the governor's proposal is approved. The clause 41C.5 exemption will reach a much larger number of Westwood seniors. Another comment from a member of the commission was that he is a senior, but he does not want or need such an exemption. Firstly, I'm pleased that he has a favorable financial situation. Many seniors don't. However, the exemption is by application only. If you don't need it, you don't need to apply for it, and you won't get it. Also, the exemption is means tested on income, even if you do apply. Typically, income goes down on retirement and expenses thereafter rise faster than income. Social Security is indexed for inflation, but the Medicare premiums rise faster than general inflation and are deducted. Those on the state pension receive a COLA of the lesser of 3% or $32.50, which badly lags inflation. Pam may discover that after she retires. Those on company pensions or annuities often receive no inflation adjustment at all. Another member expressed opposition to what he called redistribution from one group to another. This is actually an important function of government, as is the choice of how to distribute the tax burden. However, I assume he will also be opposed to the select board's proposal to make a larger contribution to the Aid to the Elderly and Disabled charity this year. That proposal comes from the select board, would be paid for directly by the Westwood taxpayers, and has no state reimbursement. I will support it, and I believe that most citizens in Westwood want to be more generous toward our seniors. In fact, the proposal for a larger contribution from the town this year suggests the select board is aware that we need to do more. However, I have some concerns about that proposal, including that it is for 1 year only, and the proposal does not change the means testing requirements that restrict benefits to only a very small fraction of our seniors. In summary, the existing Westwood tax programs for seniors reach only a tiny fraction of the over 3,000 seniors in the town, and the senior exemption approved in 2000 remains a promise that was not kept. We can and should do better for our seniors. The clause 41C.5 exemption is a way to do this with partial state reimbursement. This is an issue of great concern to seniors in Westwood. There are some important details that I have mentioned at the Finance Commission previously to bear repeating. One detail is that if the clause 41C.5 senior exemption is approved at the town meeting, it will need to be ratified by the voters at the next town election using very specific language that is in the legislation. Another detail is that I will not personally benefit from this proposal, nor will any of my relatives. There are two articles presented, and I would like to make a comment about the differences. The original article submitted in May would have Westwood accept all of the senior exemptions that it does not now accept, and any offered in the future. Important options that Westwood does not accept include the most generous option permitted by the state, that of clause 41C.5, the inflation adjustments allowed in clauses 17E and F for widows, and the increased benefits allowed in clause 57. I had communications with a number of people about this issue. I received comments from the town attorney, Mr. Ahern, and also had discussions with the Westwood Board of Assessors. I spoke with an attorney at the State Division of Local Services who was very helpful. The town attorney specifically suggested narrowing the scope of the legal reference rather than citing all of Chapter 59 of the Massachusetts laws. The new article submitted in October reflects that suggestion. I considered withdrawing the original article in favor of the new one, but I was told that I would need the signatures of all of the original signers in order to do so. The original article is broader and may be helpful in the future. I request that the October article that refers specifically to the clause 41C1/2 exemption be listed first in the warrant, as it is the more important of the two with more immediate effect and reflects the recommendation of the town attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Iddick. Can you take your screen down so we can see the entire committee? Do members of the commission have questions for Mr. Iddick? Tom.
Great, thanks, Diane. And Mr. Riddick, thank you very much. And I apologize in advance if you answered these questions. But I had a couple of quick questions. Who pays for this?
Jane, would you unmute Mr. Iddick? There you go. Mr. Iddick, did you hear the question?
Yes,
Who pays?
this is not something where a check is written. The exemption is a reduction in the property taxes for the seniors who apply and qualify. It represents a change. It would represent a change in the allocation of the property tax burden across the town. There is also a partial state reimbursement, as I mentioned, of up to $500 for each exemption that's granted.
So does that mean redistribution means that other residents pay for it? Question mark.
Well, indirectly. The recipients don't receive a check, they receive a reduction in the property tax. This is similar to what if you say that you receive a tax deduction on your income tax return. Does that mean someone else is paying for you?
Well, I guess the reason for the question is because the level of services for the town year to year doesn't change. The town needs what the town needs for services, and obviously the expense that goes along with that. So that's why I ask who pays for it. So a redistribution would be if some residents pay less, then that means other residents pay more. Is that? And I can circle back with Pam. She can probably more eloquently ask my question for me and certainly more eloquently answer it than I could.
Ms. Dukeman, do you want to address the question? I realize it's not within your purview unless you want to.
Yeah, no, just technically how that works is it is a redistribution to other residential taxes, not commercial, just residential.
So if 3,000 residents take a $2,500 reduction in their taxes and the state covers 500 of a portion of that, the rest of the $2,000 per 3,000 individuals gets redistributed to the rest of the taxpayers within town.
Yes, and the state reimbursement has a cap. They'll do $500 for the first 37 applicants.
37 people.
And then it's part of the tax rate setting process. Will you put in how much is given under this? It redistributes it through the tax rate setting process to other residents. Yeah.
Okay. Tom, I think you had other questions. Is that true?
I did. Thanks, Diane. So question 2, Mr. Iddig, how much will it cost?
Okay. Well, it is difficult to estimate the cost in advance. I would like to say that this would not provide a $2,500 reduction for 3,000 citizens. the number of people benefiting from an exemption would be substantially larger than the number provided now, but is not likely to be 3,000. I would guess perhaps a couple of hundred. But the I hope that helps. But the estimating the dollar amount is not something I can do easily. In the second year, it should be relatively stable. I would expect that the year-to-year changes would be quite small. The first year effect is more difficult to estimate. However, the town does have substantial reserves that should smooth that, and the contribution to the aid to the elderly and disabled charity will help to buffer that effect as well.
So we don't know. We don't know. That's the an additional follow-up to that, Mr. Iddig, you referenced Ashland. Of the 351 towns in Massachusetts, how many towns have adopted this program?
I'm aware of 2 that have adopted this. There are others that have been considering it, but I don't think Westwood needs to be a follower. It can be a leader on this issue. This is an important issue.
But what year did the 41C.5, when did it, when was it presented as an option to the towns?
The state made this option available in 2006. Westwood passed its proposal in 2000, which was actually very similar and would have presented the same budget issues in the first year.
So in the last 16 years, 2 out of 351 towns have adopted it.
To my knowledge.
All right, thank you.
George, you have questions for Mr. Iddig?
Yeah, Dr. Iddig. First, I'd like to qualify something, a simple answer to be a real simple. What do you consider a senior? 59.5, which is what the retirement board considers it, 62, which is what Social Security does, or 70, which is what required minimum distributions consider. What is a senior?
65 in this option.
65 years old. Having said that, I mean, there are a lot of 65-year-olds who are still working, but you're saying that there was an IRA qualifying test where there was a $40,000 limit. If they have an IRA, they won't qualify. Well, what about those people who, you know, which is an investment? What about people who bought their homes for $200,000 and now it's worth $1.5 million unencumbered? Is home value part of the asset test?
The 41C.5 exemption does not have an asset test. It only tests on income.
And income is not considered. If somebody is 65 years old and they aren't required to take anything from their 401k, they may have $2 million in a 401k. They're not required to take anything until they're 70. So according to the 41C.5, that there is no asset testing. So even though they're not drawing income from their huge 401k, they're considered, they would consider to be qualified, correct?
If a person is not drawing their retirement income, probably because they're still working, they would probably not meet the income test.
So that the answer to that is they would still qualify even though they have their money in a 401k my last question for you is a follow-up with Tom. I mean, there's a pizza that everybody in the town's got to eat from that we have to pay our bills. You're making the pizza smaller, or it doesn't seem like you're doing that. It seems like you're just taking a slice away and making everybody else pay the burden. You are saying that a senior who doesn't have income, doesn't have the same income level that somebody who is 43 years old with 3 kids has, who's working, you know, 1, 2, or 3 jobs. Well, I would pose it to you that a senior living in the town is not saving for college for their kids, is not supporting their kids, and is not paying a mortgage, and does not have as much disposable income as somebody who's perhaps retired and not have all those bills. This is a case of pay it forward. 20, 30 years ago, when seniors in the town had kids, there were the seniors before them who were paying the bill and not redistributing it, so that it gets paid for when they get it to be a senior. It's the same thing happening. So I find a lot of holes in the argument here where we're pushing the seniors out. And for that reason, I'm not sure. And also for the fact that we don't know how much it's going to cost. We don't know how many seniors would take part in it. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of detailed, hard facts. I would have a little trouble going along with it.
Thank you, George. Alex Yale, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Some of the questions were answered, but it seems like back of the napkin math, you're talking $2,500 times 200 people is your estimate, which is 500,000 less a state reimbursement of 18.5 in total. So if my math is correct, that's about 480,000 for the 200 people. That's not an insignificant amount of money. And I think some point you made, which was these individuals are not sending folks to the school system, which saves the town money. I find it hard to believe that we're saving $500,000 in variable costs by keeping a handful of kids out of the school system for them taking those spots away. But the question for you is, it seems to me like if somebody is sitting in a house that's worth $1 million and we're giving them a break on taxes, and they decide at one point that they're going to move out of town or they pass away, that $1 million property is going to their heirs, who are essentially going to be collecting $1 million of when that property is sold or passed on, all for this individual to have saved $2,500 a year on taxes at the expense of neighbors and folks, to George's point. So I'm just like, how do you figure that? Like, if somebody's sitting on a property value, it sounds like property values make themselves are not part of the factoring or the qualification of this.
I'm not sure that I understand the question. But I don't think you would find many wealthy people with income low enough to qualify for the exemption. People are, it's such people would be, I think, unlikely to even apply for it. They would need to submit their U.S. income tax return in order to do so. And their income would need to be low enough to qualify. We don't.
My question is more about the property value. That's got nothing to do with sitting on $1 million valued property, whether you have an income or not. You paid off a mortgage 25 years ago, and your values have increased by a substantial factor.
Yes, that is the problem. The property values have been going up in Westwood, and the property taxes go up along with them. So we have seniors who are struggling to make the property taxes.
And one more question, if I can, Diane, is just, is there an instrument through which we can actually get a proper gauge of how many people would leverage this kind of benefit? Because it seems like a little bit of a blank check if we don't have that answer, right? It's, by your estimate, it's 200 people, it's 500,000. If it's double that, there's $1 million, right? So is there an instrument we can actually gauge people's interest or qualification for this, as opposed to just asking the citizens to write effectively a blank check with an unknown balance?
Mr. Riddick?
Are you asking me, or perhaps Pam might be able to comment on that?
I think he's asking you as the petitioner.
I can't do that. I would need to have income information for the households in Westwood. I don't have that kind of information. I would need to have more detailed information than is available to me.
Okay. Chris Pareda, I think you have questions. You're muted.
It didn't work. A couple of things. First of all, I want to follow up with a point that Alex made. And Pam, if you could confirm or deny this, if you know, this is an exemption, not a tax deferral.
Yes, it is an exemption.
That's unlike the current program that we have in town where seniors can defer taxes and then pay the town back when the property is sold, as I understand that.
Yes, that's a different separate program where people
Okay,
can
so-
delay the payment. Yep.
Yeah, so an exemption is a very, very different thing than what we got going now. But Peter, I wonder if, did you go to the select board to gauge their interest in this? Or if you didn't, is there somebody from the select board on the, at the meeting that can weigh in on what they think?
Well, the 2000 proposal was from the select board. And that was supported by the select board and the finance commission and the citizens of Westwood. I did try to interest the select board in making this proposal, but I was not successful in making that happen. So I introduced it myself.
John Kilgariff, I think you have other questions. Go
But
ahead.
Diane, is there anybody from the select board on that's willing to weigh in?
I don't see anyone from the select board on.
Okay.
Tom,
Thanks, Diane. Dr. Riddick, you had mentioned that that seniors are, and correct me if I'm wrong with the paraphrasing, light users of services in the town. An example being typically don't have kids in the school system. Is that an accurate paraphrasing?
Yes, seniors are relatively light users of town services. That's right.
Okay,
The children in the school system cost the town about $20,000 apiece, and that's something that the seniors don't contribute. But when you push out a family of when you push out a senior household in favor of a family that has 2 or 3 children, Westwood does spend about $20,000 each for the school children, and you'll get more traffic at rush hour.
Well, yeah, so that wasn't my question. That was more of a statement, just sort of reiterating what you had said. But my question is, what do you have for data or quantification with that statement, that they're relatively lighter users of services for the town?
This is not something on which I've done a study. It's it's obvious.
okay, are there any other questions from members of FinCom? All right, I don't see any. Jane, do you see any hands raised? Michael Gay, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have one. I just want to double click on that. If we're saying that there's fewer children, that does not have a linear effect on the cost. Much of the cost that we're spending on these schools is the same if a household of 3 moves in, a household of 6, a household of 10. So I don't know if it doesn't look like the school school committee is here, but I think that it is not obvious. And again, I want to state that personally, I am all in favor of supporting our seniors. So my comments, while they may be taken as negative, I think we just have to base this on facts. And I think that it is not obvious that a household of 3 moving into town is going to cost $60,000 more. I believe that the costs are going to be the same.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if I don't see any other questions from members of the commission, we're going to open it up. Jane, am I correct?
Yes.
To questions from the public. If you have a question, if you would type your name and address and your question in the chat.
Yes,
And Jane will read it into the record.
I will.
Do we have any members of the public or the press, Jane, with us?
Yes, we do. We have members of the public with us.
Okay, I see one.
Yes, here we go.
Okay, go ahead, Jane. Thank you.
This is Mike Walsh, Selectman Mike Walsh. Has the petitioner been in contact with anyone at the COA regarding the need for the enactment of this statute? This is Michael Walsh at 47 Phillip Brook Road.
What's the COA?
That's the senior center.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, the Council on Aging.
Yes.
I have not been participating since the epidemic. I had been a regular participant in the meetings of the senior men's group, but that group has ceased since the death of its president, Bob Smith. But no, I have not consulted with the Council on Aging about this proposal.
Do we have any other questions from the public?
Not yet.
There's another one.
Nope.
No? Isn't that another one?
No.
No. Okay.
I can see a second.
Oh, I can't see one here. Nope. Dan,
Kate
can you-
Wynn, 10 Cedar Hill Drive. Jane, do you not see that?
No, I do not see that.
Well, I'll read it. Not
Okay.
a question, but a comment. This is from Kate Wynn, 10 Cedar Hill Drive. Not a question, but a comment. While I support our seniors, I do think that the town pays into the senior center, which is a new family of 2 to 3 children may never use, possibly an offset to his comment about the elders as light users. Thank you, Kate. And I don't see any other comments. All right, so thank you very much, Citizen Iddick. We appreciate your time before us tonight. Let's move on to the select board warrant articles. We have Chris Coleman, Pam Dukeman, and Mr. Walsh and Mr. Ahern, if I am correct. Is that right, Jane?
Yes, I'm moving Chris, Mike, Tish is joining us. Sorry. Hold on. Coleman. Pam is already with us.
There is another question that was proposed by a citizen.
Hold on, let me find that, Peter. Here we go, I'm back. Dave Atkins, 783 High Street. I think it would be a reasonable request to have the town estimate the cost, not expect the petitioner to provide it. Also, when money is allocated to the fund, of course, that is paid by everyone also. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so who will begin the presentation on the select board warrant articles?
Chris, do you want to go first? Sure, I'm happy to walk through and Madam Chair, if I may just provide an update from last evening's select board meeting. Tish, are you able to share that screen? Thank you. So at last night's select board meeting, the board did vote to reduce the number of articles. They removed 2 articles. Well, they removed more than 2, but starting with Select Board Article 1, the street acceptance of Porter Street, that has been removed. Select Board 3, thank you, Tish. The acquisition of real property has been removed. And miscellaneous articles 6 through 10 have been removed. In addition, the board had discussion, and as the chair indicated, there was a representation from the Pedestrian Bicycle Safety Committee at that meeting. The board did discuss Gay Street and voted to remove Gay Street from budget item 8, the Gay Street sidewalk construction project for $5.5 million. In addition to that, we're going to be adding a budget item. We're going to be splitting budget item 8, excuse me, into 2 articles. We will have the Conant Road culvert design and the cemetery expansion will remain as budget 8. The new budget 12, which will be using miscellaneous article 1 for that, will be for the Canton Street sidewalk design. I'll give you some time to digest that. And now we just have a little summary of what I just described. Select Board 1 has been removed. Select Board 3 has been removed. Miscellaneous Article 1 is now being used for new budget item 12 for the Canton Street sidewalk design. Miscellaneous Articles 6 through 10 have all been removed. And so that's how we see it right now. We still have 4 remaining miscellaneous articles. The board will continue to discuss the items. We'll continue to work on those items, and as soon as we have some information, we will certainly share that with you. We do not have any information now, but as soon as we do get it, we'll share it. As far as select board, is Nora on? Jane, can you bring Nora in as a panelist, please? So just as a quick overview, this select board 2 is the Obed Baker House disposition of town-owned property. Once Nora jumps in.
Nora's in.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, so this article is the disposition article. There are 2 articles you'll be hearing about tonight for the Obed Baker House. The first is a select board article for the disposition of property, and then you'll also hear about an article from the planning board for rezoning related to this property. So for the Obed Baker House, many of you may recall hearing about this before. We've actually been working since 2014 to try and find a buyer for this property. We had 7th luck the charm, I guess. The RFP, request for proposals, this year went to Todd Sullivan. The minimum bid price for this property was listed as $150,000, and Todd offered $320,000. His proposal includes taking the historic Obed Baker House and completely renovating it, putting a small addition on the back, and creating 2 residential units, one on the 1st floor and one on the 2nd floor, and then also constructing the property you see on the right of the page here, which would be a veterinary clinic. And that would be placed to the right. As you're looking at the Obed Baker House from High Street, it would be on the land to the right of the property. The existing cemetery barn that is behind the Obed Baker House would be removed to make way for parking for this new veterinary clinic. And Todd would produce a new, design and construct a new cemetery facility on the cemetery property for DPW. We've discussed this with Todd Korchin, who believes that the new facility would actually be more useful to the cemetery force than the building that they have now. So if the town meeting votes to approve this, the property will be sold to Todd Sullivan. It will be redeveloped as a mixed-use property with the residential units in the historic Obed Baker House and the commercial veterinary clinic on the property next door, and a new cemetery barn would be built on the cemetery property, plus the town would reap $320,000 for the property.
Thank you very much, Nora. Select Board 4 disposal of rural property, 50 Carvey Street. It's a grant of easement for a driveway, and Town Council Ahern, I believe, is on.
Yes, Patrick's with us.
Is he on?
Patrick? Pat, you're on mute.
There you go.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
So this is the property right next to, essentially right next to the Carvey Street building. And if you look at the diagram on the left, you can see that virtually all the driveway and a good part of the shed is on town property. The gentleman is looking, he's been in the house for a substantial period of time. He's looking to sell the house, and he knows he needs a driveway. He really can't get a driveway onto Dover Road because the sight lines at that corner would not be safe. What he's looking to do is get a grant of easement from the town onto Carvey Street, right in that area where the pointer is. So he can turn onto Carvey Street and then turn on safely onto Dover Road to leave the property. I've contacted an appraiser to get a value of what the cost of that easement should be. I believe it will be de minimis. This is land that is not useful to the town in any way, and it solves a problem for both the homeowner well, it solves the problem for the homeowner and gives the DPW a little bit more space with which to operate because they are quite cramped. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Pat. And again, Madam Chair, just as a recap, we still have the remaining placeholders as miscellaneous 2 through 5, and we will be using miscellaneous 1 to create that new budget 12. Thank you, Tish.
Any other comments from the select board or any other? No? Okay, we'll open it up to questions, and I think I saw a hand, but I can't see it anymore. I guess I didn't.
No, it was
Chris
Christina.
does.
It was Christina, but I don't see it.
Mr. Parita has his hand up.
No, Christina,
Christina, you had your hand up a bit ago.
she did. She's first.
Did. So the Carby Street, did that homeowner just create their own driveway without approval? And now they're looking to buy the land?
No, that driveway's been there for previous owners.
Okay.
It's been there for a while. I can't tell you how the situation happened. I kind of inherited it, and we're looking to resolve it and save the space for the DPW.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, but is the homeowner going to purchase the land from the town?
Well, we'd have to do an RFP.
Okay.
So it would be, and we've done this before. We did it a few years back over behind the Hanlon, where the road to Cedar Hill cut off about 3,700 square feet, and we got an appraisal. We sent out an RFP, and the only person it was of value to was that homeowner. We set up a minimum bid based on the appraisal, and they won the RFP, and we transferred the property. We do this.
Wonderful. And it would be safer for the town and safer for the individual.
That's the goal is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chris Parada.
Yeah, I just wanted I'm a little bit concerned that the Finance and Warrant Commission might not be able to fully review and discuss the select board's articles if they're still not ready to be presented. Chris inferred that there were still some miscellaneous articles that they were still working on, and I'm just concerned about the timing.
I'll take this one. So Chris, we have 2 or 3 things that are going on, and most of them are not secret or something that you haven't heard about. Whether or not they'll be ready for town meeting, we don't believe so, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. So even though we have 5 still there, it's not anything that you would be surprised to learn. It really is things that you've heard, discussions all about town, but we don't have any finalized and we don't have any plans yet. So we can't bring it to you with speculation. If nothing else, that's not the way I work. I like to have everything lined up for you to have the answers available. But I'm sure you've heard the rumblings on social media and discussions around town, but whether or not we can get there before the deadline, we don't really believe so, with perhaps, as I said, 1 or 2 exceptions.
Well, maybe what you need to do is defer it till next year then. I really am concerned about the select board thinking they can bring something to the Finance and Warrants Commission at the end of March and expect us to fully review it and discuss it so we can give a informed opinion as to whether town should vote in favor or not. So that's my concern.
The only 2 that I will say that are bubbling, they're no-brainers. So I don't think there's going to be much of a discussion. I think they're pretty simple and pretty straightforward. And I think that you'll see when and if we can get them done. If we can't get them done, or you don't think it's enough time, then you have the right to vote against them. So that's believe me, we wish they were done, but because of meetings like this, it takes a lot longer to get things done.
So can I follow up and ask a question of Mr. Ahern? So what happens? This was our public hearing for the select board articles. we understand there may be more, but this is our public hearing for the select board articles. Is it now the expectation that the rest of the select board articles would get added to our last public hearing?
That has historically been the case. The select board does not like to do things late, but sometimes because of the nature of town government and how you have to do things through a town meeting, you only get one public hearing on something. And as Mr. Wall said, if that's not enough time for you, you're free to recommend indefinite postponement till you can study it further. But yes, you'd get a crack at it at your 29th meeting. I can remember times when I was on the select board, making changes the night of town meeting. The select board doesn't like to do that, but sometimes it happens that way, and they do work very hard to try and prevent that. And believe me, they would much prefer to have what they're trying to do in front of you tonight than not.
Okay, thank you. Tom Kilgare, if you've got a question.
Diane, could I just interject also? We have on occasion had select board requests to us to come during our subcommittee presentation which will be for us the 15th this year. And if something comes up and they have information that they has, sort of come together, we have entertained that they would come before us to just give us, some feedback around and more details on a potential article, and then we'd see it again at the final public hearing. So.
Okay, but it definitely has to go before the public hearing, right? We can't just.
Yes.
Yes, no, and it's our intention as soon as it's done to get it to the FinCom so that they can look at it. But they're not done.
Okay. All right, Tom.
Thanks, Diane. And actually, I don't have a question regarding the select board articles. I did want to, when appropriate, either after the select board article discussion or the planning board article discussion, circle back to Mr. Atkins' question, because I did want to bring that back into the conversation and discussion where it's at.
Okay. Let's wait till the end, if that's okay. Okay.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Caitlin?
Yes, thank you. So I have 2 questions on the Obed Baker House proposal. First, can you just confirm, did you say that the sale price would be $320,000?
Yes.
Is that market rate for that property?
So take into account the extreme cost of renovating the Obed Baker House, I believe it's more than market rate. We were setting in the RFP, we set the minimum bid at $150,000 because we didn't think that anything greater than that would leave a developer the funding necessary to actually renovate the building. I know most of you have never been in that building, but I can assure you that there's not much left of it inside the walls. There is a historic brick fireplace, a cooking fireplace that's inside, but most of the walls and the ceilings are non-existent. And the floor is riddled with holes. It's a building that's in deplorable condition. I think we've done our best to keep it watertight. There's a roof that was put on when the building was moved to its current site. Windows were replaced by the Historical Society when they owned the building, but it is in desperate need of quite a bit of attention. When we first had what appeared to be a successful RFP back in 2014, I believe, or 2015, there was a thought that the Westwood Media Center was actually interested in the building. But in between the analysis that they had first presented and them coming before the select board to receive the building, they determined that the cost had doubled in the need to renovate, in the cost for renovating the building. We believe it will be a minimum of $600,000 to renovate that building, a minimum.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And just to confirm, that $320,000, that was the highest bid out of all the RFPs?
By far the highest out of all the RFPs and the only bid in this RFP.
Okay. And then final question I have is, how does it work exactly? So it's a formal sale to a new owner. So does the town hire a realtor to help facilitate that sale?
No, that's not necessary. So what happens is if town meeting approves this, there is simply a closing that takes place after town meeting.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. That's all my questions.
You're welcome.
Christina,
Yeah, thanks for getting to me. The Ovid Baker House, does that include the land too for $320,000? The plot of land?
Yes, it does. It does. It includes the land and the structure. But now remember that we received $320,000 plus we received the value of a new cemetery barn that will be constructed for the town. And in addition, we have land that is currently off the tax rolls being added onto the tax rolls, and the majority of that land will be added on as commercial property. So we do believe it's a financially viable project for the town.
anything else, Christina? No? No? Mr. Gay?
Yes, I just want to comment on Christina's question and also the general value of Obed Baker. As Mr. O'Hearn is aware, I was on the Westwood Media Center, WestCat at the time. We went through a long process and we were very close to moving forward with Obed Baker. It fell through when the costs to renovate were just so prohibitive. Quite frankly, we just couldn't make it work. I was shocked that the town is getting the money that they're getting. The value of the land obviously is a rich asset, but we weren't in a position to move Obed Baker. It's a historical building. And so I think this, again, from an experience of Westwood Media Center, this is a great outcome for the town. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Jane, help me out here.
No other hands?
No. Okay, so Jane, do we go to questions from the public?
Yes, please. Questions from public and press, and we need names and addresses in the chat.
You just put your question, your name, your address in the chat. Give us a couple minutes here. Okay, I am not seeing anything. All right, well, we want to thank you very much for coming before this public hearing. Very much appreciated. Important information. Thank you.
Thank
So
you for your time.
then I think that we go to the planning board, if I'm correct, and that is Abby McCabe again and Chris Path. Is Chris going to join us?
Yes, Chris, I just moved Chris in, and Ellen Rawlings, Kate Wynn, Dave Atkins. Abby, would you like me to move Dan Bailey in at this point?
Nope. I'm sorry. Do you have all the 5 planning board members? I'm sorry. Okay. Chris Path, is he here?
He is.
Okay.
I'm up here.
Okay.
Don't know where I appear on
Welcome
your
to the
screen.
planning board. We're happy to have you. Well, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you for having us. This is a joint meeting. It's a planning board meeting as advertised. So if you'll indulge us, we will open our meeting and I'll take a roll call vote to ensure everyone's attendance. Ellen.
Here.
If you guys could unmute, that'd be helpful. Dave. Here. Kate.
Here.
And Tom. Is Tom with us? I don't see Tom McCusker with us yet, but we do have.
Tom isn't
Sorry.
here yet, as far as I can see, Chris.
You don't see him, Diane? Okay, or sorry, Jane. Well, we do have a quorum, so we'll move on. We are here before you to talk about our zoning articles from the planning board. And Abby McCabe, our town planner, has prepared a PowerPoint presentation to discuss these articles. So I will hand this over to Abby for that presentation.
Thank you. I'll share my screen. Now, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the planning board tonight is before you to present 6 zoning articles. They have had so far 2 public hearings. They opened their public hearing on February 1st. They held a continued hearing on February 15th, And they also continued the hearing tonight so they could all be here and hear any comments tonight that comes out of tonight's meeting. They have unanimously supported all 6 of their articles and recommend that you favorably support all of their articles. The first article that the planning board has is the mixed use and multifamily residential overlay district zoning proposal. This is a proposal for a zoning map amendment to add a new overlay district to the map, as well as adopt a new section in the zoning for this mixed use and multifamily residential. The purpose of this proposal is to comply with the state law that was adopted by the state legislature in 2020. This state law was adopted by the legislature in June 2020, and it made several amendments to the State Zoning Act. And the purpose of those changes were to promote the production of multifamily housing within walking distance of public transportation. And the reason that they did this was to address the severe housing shortage across the region. This is all of your elected state representatives and your state senators. In June 2020 or July 2020, they realized that it's a regional problem that needed a regional solution. So one of the changes made to the State Zoning Act, it was made to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section A. There's a new provision that impacts all MBTA communities. That's 175 communities in Massachusetts that has train and bus service. And the law says that an MBTA community shall have a zoning ordinance or bylaw that provides for at least one district of a reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. Now, the legal term of shall means must, and it's mandatory. It's not an optional. Shall means must. Multifamily housing refers to housing, a building designed for 3 or more residences. And as of right, you may hear the term, it's often referred to as by right use. That means the use, multifamily, cannot be a discretionary approval. The use itself cannot trigger a discretionary review. Currently, Westwood zoning does not comply because our multifamily generally triggers a special permit, which is a discretionary review. So the planning board began working on the new zoning amendment since last summer. The state law has 5 major components. All MBTA communities have to adopt zoning that's at least one zoning district of a reasonable size, located within a half mile of a train station or a bus stop. The zoning has to be suitable for families with children. So that means it can't have bedroom or age restrictions. There is a minimum gross residential density that has to be allowed, which is 15 units per acre. And that the multifamily use, the permit process cannot be a discretionary review. Some examples, some local examples in Westwood of what this higher density looks like. We have a few in town. The image on your left is a Gables residential apartment building at University Station that has 350 apartments, and given the land size, the density there is 51.9 acres. And the condos at University Station, they're named University Place, developed by Pulte Homes. There's 100 condos in two buildings, and that density is 36.4 units per acre. So both of these are a much higher density than what this law and what the zoning proposal is requiring. The image on your left, this is the new building that's under construction now on the corner of Washington and East Street that has 18 condos above the first floor commercial. That's 21.7 units per acre. And the image to your right is the Colburn School that has the bank, and it has 6 condos above that, and that's 13.6 units per acre. The image to your left, that is the building that is fairly new in Islington on Washington Street. It has 12 apartments above some office space. This is the building next to Islington Pizza that has 12, the density there is 12.6 units per acre. And another example further down on Washington Street, before you get to the Clappertree Street, is the Washington Arms apartment building that has 9 apartments, and their density there is 8.6. And now the planning board has been proactive. They began working on the zoning. They first began looking at where to propose the zoning. As soon as this new law was well circulated last summer, they've been working on it. They reviewed many options. They've discussed this at almost all of their meetings since the summer. Tonight is the 20th public meeting that the planning board has had, and they've decided that the best option to protect the town and to plan for Westwood's future is to propose a zoning article now. Back in January 2021, the state did release some material that said they were working on guidelines. They didn't give a timeline of when they were going to be distributed, because the law does give authority to the State Department of Housing and Community Development to develop guidelines for compliance of the MBTA communities. Those guidelines were released in December, this past December. We are currently in a public comment section, public comment period due at the end of this month. The planning board is working on and expects to submit their comments within the next couple of weeks. The guidelines call for final compliance by the end of December 2023. And the final guidelines, they didn't give an exact date, but they said later this year, possibly this summer 2022. The planning board is proposing a zoning article now because by the time we get the final guidelines, we may be well into fall town meeting, and that only leaves one additional town meeting, the annual town meeting next year, for full compliance. The draft guidelines that we have, they do define the reasonable size that was listed in the law. That defines it as at least 50 acres of total land area, or at least 25 acres for an overlay district. In addition to the size requirement, the guidelines create a little formula that communities have to use to fully comply with this reasonable size. It includes a component for a housing capacity. It also designates every community by their public transportation. They have bus communities, and the unit capacity is determined by a percentage of the town's total housing stock. The bus communities are required to have a capacity of 20% of the current housing stock, and the commuter rail communities are required to have 15% of the housing stock, as listed in the 2020 census. The draft guidelines that were released categorizes Westwood as a bus community. That means that the housing capacity requirement is the 20% of the total housing stock. When we look at that math, 20% of the 5,801 residential units that we have in town, the draft guidelines say that we have to have a housing capacity. The zoning has to allow a capacity of 1,160 residential units. If you divide that by the 15 units per acre, that's a total of 77 acres for the total district size. If the final guidelines change, as the planning board is proposing, the planning board is submitting comments that we believe that Westwood is a commuter rail community, not a bus community, that the requirement would drop down to 15% of the total housing stock. So we'd be looking at that percentage, the total possible housing capacity would be 870. And if you divide that by the 15 units per acre, that total acreage would drop down to 58 acres per unit rather than the 77 acres. So what the planning board is proposing in this article before you and what we're asking you to adopt, it proposes a new overlay district over the Gables residential and the University Place condos at University Station, as well as the 22 Everett Street property. So looking at that, the draft guidelines say 800, and if we are a commuter rail community, if that's the designation, that means a total unit capacity is 807 70 housing units. With this proposal, the existing housing units already account to account for 450 existing today at the Gables residential and the condos at University Station. So then we'd be looking at a capacity for an additional 420 additional housing units. And if you took that 420, that would amount to 28 acres total at the 15 units per acre. Westwood's proposal right now is not that full extent. The planning board's proposal, it accounts for a total housing capacity of 552 total units. That's accounting for the 450 at University Station and the Everett Street property. Looking at that size, that would allow a capacity of 102 additional housing units. The total acreage with the zoning proposal is 16.5 acres at the 15 units per acre. And the planning board is recommending to you and to the state that they believe that this size that they're proposing is reasonable for Westwood. So you can visually see what we're talking about. The new zoning overlay is the train station is here, over the Gables apartments here, and also here are the condos, the image to your left, the 100 condo units, and also proposing the zoning overlay district to the two parcels at 22 Everett Street. That, given the size, which is just under 7 acres, that would allow capacity for 102 units. Now we're talking about zoning here. We're not proposing development, but our zoning has to allow for that amount of housing. In addition to the zoning map change, there is a section of the new section of the zoning bylaw proposed. It's section 9.9, which is the mixed use and multifamily residential overlay district. Now, the term as of right, by right, it doesn't mean that there's no review. There is a review and application process with the planning board. That's very detailed. It's 16 pages long. The permit process is non-discretionary, but it's an environmental impact design review, an EIDR permit process. That is the most common application that the planning board receives. It allows proposals up to 15 units per acre. It does entail a public hearing process with the planning board that also includes an abutter notification. The zoning outlines height, setback, parking requirements. There's a full drainage and stormwater review, exterior lighting review. The proposed zoning also includes a provision to require some of the units to be affordable. Now, I've heard some comments about calling this a new affordable housing proposal. This proposal in the state law, the intent is to help reduce the high cost of housing across the region if we increase the supply. However, this is not affordable housing, but the planning board zoning includes a provision that when projects are proposed, that 15% of those units have to be affordable. That means the remaining 85% of the units are market rate, and it'll be market rate for new construction if a project comes forward. And then 10% of those units must have 3 bedrooms. That's consistent with the state law to support family-friendly housing. And to really take a look at what could be proposed, we're talking about zoning, what we're allowed, but if a project were to come forward, it would be at the 22 Everett Street under the new zoning. It would allow up to 102 housing units. It would require 10 3-bedroom units. The remaining 92 units could be 1 or 2 bedroom. The remaining 87 units would be market rate, and then 15 would be required to be deeded affordable units. And then 2 of the 4 affordable units must be 3-bedroom units. And in conclusion, the planning board has unanimously supported this article. They've been diligently and proactively working on this since the summer. We are in the public comment period. So as part of the public comments to the state, the planning board is looking to notify the state that we believe the current proposal that the planning board has brought forward to the town for adoption complies with the law. It may not necessarily comply with the draft guidelines, but the draft guidelines are in the draft form. So the planning board wants to present to the state that we are complying with the spirit and the letter of the law, And our argument is that the planning board's proposal complies with the law and that the draft guidelines should be revised to be reasonable for Westwood. And we believe this proposal is reasonable for Westwood. Now, do you want to take questions now, or should we keep going through our other articles?
Keep going, please, Abby. We'll take questions at the end.
Okay. The second article for the planning board is related to permitting for solar arrays. The planning board's proposal adds a new section 7.7, solar design review approval. It amends the permit process for solar applications to be more consistent with the section in state law that grants special protection for solar facilities so that they're not unreasonably regulated. The proposed zoning, it says that any solar that's mounted on a structure on your roof of your house or even an accessory building such as a garage, that would go straight to building and electrical permits only. There would be no special board approval process needed, which is similar to the process now. Right now, if it's on a principal building, it goes right to the building permit stage. However, we've amended it to allow accessory structures can go this route as well. The zoning bylaw allows an administrative review process by the town planner for solar that's not mounted on a structure. If it were on a ground, for example, at a yard in a residential property or over some parking spaces, if it's a smaller facility, then it would go through an administrative review process. It would follow the new setbacks and height restrictions that we've laid out in this proposed bylaw. It sets a maximum height that any facility mounted on the ground can't be higher than 25 feet, and then a minimum of 14 feet if it was over a commercial parking lot. It also sets a new front yard setback. If any solar was proposed in a front yard, it's a 25-foot setback. And there's also language in there that screenings for landscaping could be imposed on an application that came forward. So the image, what you see on the left here is a common one you might see at a residential property. It's fairly small. Usually we've had 4 applications come forward in the last several years since we adopted solar in 2015. We've only received 4 applications since then, and they've all been around 700 to 800 square feet, which is about the size of a large in-ground pool. And then the zoning also adds a new definition for large-scale solar, and that requires a planning board public hearing and a planning board review process. So this is for solar when it's proposed as a principal use, or if it's greater than 10,000 square feet in size. So that's what you see in the image on your right. If something such as a solar farm were proposed, that would first require a planning board review, an EIDR application process with a notice to the abutters, and that would need to be approved prior to building and electrical permits. The planning board's third article, this is the High Street rezoning. Picking up where we left off earlier, this about the Obed Baker House, this proposed zoning changes rezones the parcel that has the Obed Baker House, 909 High Street, as well as the town adjacent property next to it. It's the vacant land right now. Currently that's in the single resident C zone. The proposal is to rezone both parcels to the local business A and expand the flexible multiple use overlay district to the Obed Baker properties, as well as expanding it to the commercial plaza next door. The reason this is proposed is to do the project as submitted in response to the RFP that the town put out, the mixed use for the 2 residential units in the new veterinarian building that requires a flexible multiple use overlay district special permit from the planning board and the rezoning. Now, the developer is still working on plans. The plans have not been submitted yet to the planning board, but that will require a full submission of special permit, fully designed engineered plans that would go to the planning board. It would also need Conservation Commission approval as well. So the image on your left shows the preliminary proposal. This is the Obed Baker house with the small addition on the back for the 2 residences, the new veterinarian building on the town land to the right with parking in the back and on the side. This is the existing zoning where the Obed Baker house is currently in the local business A zone, as well as the plaza next door. So the proposed zoning changes making all parcels, the parcels associated with this RFP and this to be in the local business A, and to overlay the flexible multi-use overlay district across all 4 parcels. The planning board's 4th article, this is related to alterations made to properties that are currently non-conforming. Currently, any property that is non-conforming in relation to not meeting existing dimensional setbacks outlined, regulated in the zoning bylaw, if they currently don't conform, they're considered non-conforming. If some of you were on the board in 2017, if you remember, we used to have any alterations to a non-conforming property used to be by special, go through the, would require to go through the special permit process with the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, in an effort to try to get some properties to comply to help minimize the mansionization of properties, we added in a new provision that if you were increasing the non-conforming nature, or if you were creating a new non-conformity, then that would trigger a variance application to the zoning board, which is harder to get than a special permit. However, earlier this year, after review by town council in connection with the building commissioner, some court cases were reviewed more carefully, and the courts have found that non-conforming properties should be given some more flexibility with the special permit and not be all through the variance process. So the planning board's article adds some language to that section of 4.53, where it's only talking about properties that are already non-conforming. If they submit a building permit for an alteration, this proposal gives the building commissioner an opportunity to look at it and decide if the change is minor, in his opinion, then it could be considered as a special permit application to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And if it's major and could potentially be more detrimental to the neighborhood, it would be a variance application to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So either way, whether application, this proposal changes the permit process with the Zoning Board of Appeals. The building commissioner still does not have the authority to issue a building permit without going through the zoning board process, but it allows some flexibility for the building commissioner to fully consider the alteration proposed. And if he considers it minor and not more detrimental to the neighborhood, it could be considered as a special permit with the Zoning Board of Appeals. If he believes it's major and it could be a concern to the neighborhood, then that would be a variance application to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Both special permit and the variance is a public hearing and with a butter notification with the for the zoning board. So essentially what you're looking at, this article is allowing some flexibility on the type of the permit process that goes to the zoning board. The planning board's 5th article, this is rezoning for 394 and 396 Providence Highway. Currently at the property at 394 is the existing Shell gas station and the convenience store. The property owner approached us that they're looking to renovate their facility and they would like to expand to the adjacent lot. They have recently purchased that lot from the state. It used to be part of the state right-of-way. And to be able to do this, they need the zoning needs to be extended to the lot next door. Currently, the gas station is a non-conforming use. It's non-conforming in the industrial office zoning district, but the gas station is allowed in the highway business. So the planning board's proposal is to rezone both properties to be in the highway business. That way, the gas station use, the motor vehicle service use is an allowed use, and it would allow the redevelopment of this property. Now you can see the image on the left is the existing zoning here. There's no zoning here because this it used to be part of the state's right of way, which does not have a zoning designation. So the proposed zoning is to change both parcels to the highway business, which is consistent with the zoning across the street where the other auto dealerships are. This project would still also require a project review process and application submitted to the planning board, the zoning board, and the conservation commission. But this zoning change would allow the redevelopment of the gas station. And the 6th article is a housekeeping article. This is really non-substantial changes. This is just changes we've noticed in the zoning bylaw, little corrections, some errors, some typos. We noticed some overlay districts that weren't listed in the bylaw, and clarifying some definitions. And so that concludes the presentation. And so myself and the planning board members are all here to help answer any questions you have. And I just don't want to forget, before the planning board leaves, the planning board should vote to continue their public hearing to their meeting next week on Tuesday, March 8th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. That way the planning board can discuss anything further before coming back to you at the end of the month.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the Finance Commission? Christina.
Yes, well, I just wanted to say thank you to the planning board again. I really appreciate your efforts here in trying to comply with this rule. However, it is not yet finalized, and we've given you this comment twice that we want you to hold off until the law has been finalized, public comment has closed, so that we can make the proper changes for Westwood. We owe this to the taxpayers to not get ahead of this, to be patient, so that we don't overzone. We do not have the bandwidth in town to absorb that many families into our school district. And we need to take our time and really plan this out appropriately. So, have you guys really kind of considered waiting a bit longer until it's final? And has the state responded to your question and your appeal, whether or not we're a bus or community?
I'll answer your second question first. No, they have not responded. We have until the end of the month to submit our the public comment portion. And your first question, why are we doing this now? Well, the planning board, the first question we asked ourselves when we took this matter up was, are we in agreement that as a board, this is something we need to pursue? And the 5 of us unanimously agreed, this is the time for us to work on this zoning article. We believe we have complied with the spirit and the letter of the law. The guidelines, as you indicated, are not set in as part of this law. They are merely draft guidelines. And we believe that the 50 acres that are spelled out in the guidelines is something that is unreasonable to the town of Westwood in this size. And we believe that the result of the public comment is going to find that the state is going to pull back from that ask of 50 acres. It also was outlined in the presentation that if we wait and they don't finalize the guidelines, sorry, my video stopped. It seems to be doing that a lot today. If we wait and they don't give us guidelines by the end of the summer, that could put us in jeopardy of racing and the time you're asking us to take to thoughtfully or more thoughtfully consider this. We may end up with very little time. And the result may very well be the same. what we have decided as a board is that these 3 parcels that we're proposing, totaling somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 acres, are the 3 best parcels that comply with this law, falling within half a mile of our train stations. We further have identified that we believe that the guidelines have been issued in error in a couple of different situations. One, identifying us as a bus town, despite the fact that we have only 1 bus route coming through town and 2 train lines and 3 train stations falling within half a mile of the town of Westwood. So we plan to augment our public comments with information like that, illustrating that not just are they wrong there, they're wrong in the 50 acres. It's not a one blanket law can apply to every town. The 175 towns that have been identified are vastly different in makeup. In terms of available acreage to zone that would not be detrimental to the makeup of a town. The type of town that you're talking about, we believe that acting now puts us in the best, most defendable position for this falling in compliance with this law. We don't believe that even if we are forced to give 50 acres, and again, that may not come down in the summer. This law was passed last January, and they took 12 months or 11 and a half months to give us these guidelines. So promising us that these guidelines, these drafts will no longer be draft, but part of the law sometime this summer, we don't feel comfortable with that. It could very well be next December that we get these guidelines turned into part of the law. And that puts us in exactly the same position that we're here now. They may not, it may very well be the summer, but even still, we believe that falling within a half a mile of these train stations, these are our 3 best developable areas for our town. They don't put us in a bad situation with our commercial tax base. They are, sorry, again, my video stops. The Everett Street location has been, we have been approached by multiple developers inquiring about the availability of this for development for various offerings. And this is something, if we zone it, we're out in front. We're ahead of the game. We're telling the developer where to go. And also, rest assured, we have been contacted since this law came out by developers about wanting to develop multifamily housing in Westwood. And if we don't identify a zone now, we put ourselves in a very vulnerable position to a lawsuit. I'm not forecasting that it's absolutely going to happen, but it puts us in a bad situation. And as I said before, even if they mandate us to do 50 acres, identifying these 3, which we believe will help our town and not hurt it, gives us 16. It means we have to find 34 more acres. So I apologize for the long-winded answer, but that's the answer of, we have considered it and we all unanimously agreed not to stop and wait, but to proceed.
Again, my question wasn't with respect to the sites that you chose. I think you guys did a spectacular job choosing those sites. My question really is, by zoning before the law is final, we could be incorporating more acreage than we actually need to.
Well,
if the law changes.
So if the
which
law
it
changes
could after public comment. If we're having this much of a visceral reaction to this law, every other town in Massachusetts is also.
So as we pointed out, we have identified three locations, 2 of which are in University Station and 1 of which is in Everett Street. The Everett Street location is just under 7 acres, and the University Station has 2 lots that, by all accounts from anyone who understands our town, are not at all likely to be developed in following this law. It is the planning board's attempt to follow the letter of the law by zoning. We're not obligated to create development. We're obligated to create zoning for development. So.
But it's not final yet.
I
We
understand.
shouldn't be doing this until it's final.
Okay, I think we get the question and the answer. So I'm just going to move us along so other people also have a chance. Jim, you also have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned that if we don't do this, we're vulnerable, but we're not vulnerable until after December 2023, correct?
Right.
Okay, so it gets back to Christina's position that there's no rush. What's the advantage? I mean, you say that you're following the spirit of the law, but not the letter of the law. So the state still has the right to come down and penalize you because you haven't followed the letter of the law.
Well, we haven't done anything outside of the law thus far. Those are draft guidelines.
Right, but your draft, as you said, only follows the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. So even to pass this warrant or this planning board change doesn't put us in compliance.
No, we think it complies with the law, not necessarily with the draft guidelines, but those guidelines are draft. So our argument from the planning board is that we are complying with both the spirit and the letter of the law. That's the legislation. That is not going to change. The state representatives, the legislator they're not going to change the law. We're only talking about 16 acres here. If it changes, when the final guidelines come out, the planning board can take a look at it. And it's more likely they may need to expand at a future zoning article in the future if they wish to. We're only talking about 16 acres when it's much greater. That's what's included. And we're only really talking about one property that has the opportunity to develop here. So right now, the planning board believes this proposal complies fully with the law.
And Abby, Chris, if I may add to that, please.
Certainly.
Thank you. I do want to just highlight that this is a place where the goals of the state happen to align with the comprehensive plan created by our town. The town has asked through the comprehensive plan to provide a more walkable town center to make it easier for people to use the commuter rail and the buses in our town. It just so happens that this is also what the state is looking for. So when you ask why now, part of the answer is because this law is here. But another underpinning is internally in the town. The town has asked us for this. So it's a smaller, it's 16 acres versus 50, which is not enough for the state possibly in the future, or when we get the final guidelines for this, but it is certainly what the town has asked us for. So I appreciate your concern when it comes to how this addresses the state law, that in your opinion, it may be too early, but it is not too early as far as the comprehensive plan is concerned.
Well, the comprehensive plan also asks for open space.
It
You haven't
does.
addressed that one.
That if there's a state law that shows up, I'd be very happy to address that one.
Well, on the one part, you're saying you're doing this because the town asked for it. On the other part,
No,
you're
sir.
saying the state
No.
mandated it.
I'm saying that they are aligned. I'm not saying I'm doing this because the town asked for it. I'm saying they are aligned.
Caitlin, you have a question.
Yeah, just clarification. So I understand kind of the goal with this proposal. It's, trying to follow the spirit of the guidelines. We're not going to meet the expected 50 acres. So then I guess my question would be, why add in the Everett Street lot? Why not just leave the proposal with the already developed land? Because then it would have no impact at all. We wouldn't have to worry about development. We'd have more time then to wait for the final law or guidelines to come out.
Well, we did talk about that too. And our approach was two-pronged. And we saw that these two areas, the University Station and Everett Street, gave us the two-prong approach. We not only are looking to follow the letter of the law, we have constituents in our town that are advocating for this type of development. And we represent them as well. So we have to factor in the views of the town and the views of our as a whole and our individual constituents too. We think that the Everett Street property is the best one suited that may actually get developed in this situation. We think it has the least visible impact. It has the least, sorry, I was in and out there. It has the least amount of any possible negative impact. It's already on, it's got services on Everett Street. It is already a part of our multiple use overlay district system. It has underlying local business or highway business, sorry. It is a area that is underdeveloped, and it's a spot that we think fits this very well. And that's why we did that. We talked about just following the letter of the law, and we didn't think that that was right for Westwood. We had this plot of land, and we believed it was the right plot of land for this particular zoning.
May I just add a comment to that? The Everett Street property is also ripe for development. And a concern is that if this is not zoned under this bylaw, and the development is not guided in a manner that can make that development eligible for this zoning in the future, we may lose that opportunity. So we do expect this property to be developed. We have rezoned it a couple of times. There, as Chris pointed out, there are a couple of different overlay districts over this parcel. One of those overlay districts is the flexible multiple use overlay district, which allows for it to be developed for mixed use or for 100% housing if that housing is senior development, for 50% housing and 50% commercial if it's done under the FMUOD as family housing. We believe that it could be developed under this new bylaw in a very similar manner to how it could be developed under the FMUOD section of the bylaw, but we would get credit for it under this new law. As far as the question of timing, I just comment that, as Abby showed in her PowerPoint, the law says that we shall zone. It doesn't have a time frame in it. The time frame that you've seen comes in these draft guidelines. We're not sure what the time frame will be in the final guidelines, but the law itself does not have a time frame. The law requires the town, as other towns with MBTA facilities in them, to have this zoning in place. We are concerned that we could be susceptible to a lawsuit at any time for failure to comply with that law. Whether the lawsuit would be a success or not remains to be seen. Whether one will be filed or not remains to be seen. But we do know that developers are interested in developing property within a half a mile of a train station, and we are concerned that they would take suit against the town, which we will have the cost of defending. Another point I'd want to make out, there was a mention, I think it was Jim that mentioned open space. Actually allowing this development to go forward does increase open space, because it takes a property at Everett Street that is severely degraded, has two brooks running through it that are running through culverts that could be daylighted, and we would have an opportunity to not only commercially develop the property in a manner that adds to our tax base, but also to improve the open space in that area and to get much needed improvement that adds into our Islington Center downtown. So for all those reasons, I strongly support the planning board's interest in this article.
George
Okay, so-
Hertz.
Yeah,
Can
that's-
you- George Hertz, you have your hand up?
Okay. Chris and the staff, Abby and the staff and the elected members of the planning board, I'm intrigued by this approach. To me, the interesting thing you've done is you've taken advantage of what's already taken place at University Station, which may put this town in a very unique position that we can count both the gables and the condominiums as part of the requirement. Number two, 22 Everett Street is something I think if you can get the development there, I don't think you could not pick a better parcel for a multi-use for development satisfying this law. At the end of the day, you guys are the elected officials. You spent a long time working on this, and I think it's a unique proposal. I think, as Abby said, the law is the law. The guidelines are what are subject to change and possibly interpretation. So I think Westwood putting a stake in the ground the way we've done it gives us a starting point. I think it shows a good faith effort. I also think it shows us a good initial negotiating point. And, I'm not sure if Dan Bailey's on the phone, what his perspective is as a counsel to the planning board, but it seems to me that being proactive in dealing with this, and frankly, maybe protecting what happens at 22 Everett Street is a very interesting approach. I think you have really evolved tremendously working on this thing over the last year or so. So I'm actually leaning very much towards supporting your proposal. I think it's very creative. Those are my thoughts.
George Laham, you have your hand up, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more asking for like clarification here. It seems like the planning board is being proactive on a law that the state has passed that we need to do something. And it's not a choice. It's a state law that we have to do something. And the planning board's trying to be proactive in doing something. But I see that, and I commend them on being proactive and doing something and picking the pieces that they picked. You know, again, that tumble bus area has been a disaster for 15, 20 years. But what I struggle with is, it seems like there's a lot of unknowns. Nothing's been finalized. You know, at the last meeting, I asked a question and there was no intent to insult anybody or any profession. So I apologize for that. But it seems like there's a lot of laws going around, but nothing's finalized. There's a lot of proposals and thoughts going around, but we're not sure. Are we a bus town? Are we a commuter town? It's unknown. So on something like this, which is a hot issue, it's tough to support or have a strong or firm opinion on something when we don't have hard facts and hard information. You know, we are definitely not a bus community. I mean, we have 2 commuter rails and I can see that, but just because we have the Forest Hill T that runs through Washington Street and Islington, you know, doesn't mean we're a bus town. I think there's a lot of issues that need to be finalized, such as that, before we really understand. I mean, we don't want to give the appearance to, you know, Joe Voter and Westwood that this is being pushed through by a developer who wants to make some money in real estate right now, which, you know, you can build anything right now and it's going to sell, especially in Westwood. But that's just an opinion.
Okay, Christina, do you have another question?
Yeah, I guess I'm really interested to find out who, you know, Kate mentioned that you're telling us that people want this. I have not gotten that impression from any of my neighbors who are all up in arms about this and need me to represent them as a citizen of this town. You know, is it developers that want this, or is it citizens of Westwood that want this?
So I appreciate the question. You may not be hearing from residents who are strongly in support of this. I definitely am. But more importantly, it's in our it is in alignment with the goals of portions of our comprehensive plan. And that is a document that came out last year, I believe the year before, that was worked on for 2 years with lots of input from residents over, I think, a 2-year period. I forget how long it was that we received feedback on that, but I'd be very happy to share that with you and highlight those sections. It is, people want this. Not everybody, right? But people, residents.
Bill Bruce, you have your hand up.
Yeah, a couple things. One, did the presentation that they provided, and did we get that beforehand? Because I didn't see it, and I just want to make sure. Because you know, this is a pretty important topic, you know, and as a resident with children in the schools and understand the impact of the schools, I saw a lot of different numbers thrown on there around the number of units. You know, it would have been appropriate to get this more in advance, especially if you've been working on it for 6 months, so we can really assess it. So I don't feel like I can crunch all my numbers on this, but I'm concerned with the burden on the schools. And if an assessment has been done around that and opening up the Everett Street property, I saw 10% had to be 3-bedroom units, which to me, that's a minimum of 2 kids. So 2 to 4 kids could be a couple hundred. I mean, Downey's bursting at the seams. So I think, you know, it would be good to get a better assessment of the impact of the schools opening up this property, and maybe provide that next time to us, and also kind of provide this in advance.
So you raised the same question that came up for the select board, and this is a concern that I as chair have about the commission getting reports in advance so that we can study them. And I share your concern, and I share it as it related to the select board, and I share it as it relates to the planning board. I'm not sure that
May-
is
may I
related
say
to the
something?
substance of the article.
May I say something with regard to the schools? I've been on the planning board for 10 years. I've heard a lot of applications for by right subdivisions being developed in our town. In fact, we just had one that's still being developed in the Downey neighborhood. 10 or 11 homes, I believe at least 4, maybe 5 bedrooms each, were being built as a by right development, which is what this multifamily zoning would provide for, is a by right development. There's 4 or 5 bedrooms in 11 different homes. Not one person in this town came to our meetings for this by right development to complain about what adverse reaction this is going to have to the Downey School District. So just because these homes are in the form of a multifamily, these bedrooms are in a multifamily, it doesn't deserve any more or less scrutiny than these by right subdivision just because they're single family homes. So there were 44 to 50 bedrooms developed in the Downey neighborhood 3 to 4 years ago, and nobody challenged what it might do to the schools. This is zoning for a by right, and we're mandated by the state to do this. So looking at numbers for the school, to quote or paraphrase Emily Parks in recent meetings, we welcome all children, regardless of where they live in town. So I find it really, this is not something that we can say, oh, does the school district agree with this? The school district has no more say than that 10 lot development we developed 3 years ago. They just are there to educate the people who have children in our town. Educate the children, sorry. This is not something that we can vacillate over. We can vacillate over where we're talking, but we have to find a place to zone. Otherwise, we haven't zoned. And I will harken back to what was said before. This draft guideline may not become part of the law by the end of the summer. It took them 12 months to get us draft guidelines after bringing in the law. There's no guarantee we're going to have a full year before our next town meeting. We have 2 guaranteed town meetings before we fall outside compliance of this law. If we just don't do anything at this town meeting and roll the dice on the second one, and the town says no, we have nothing. We are not defendable at all. If we enact this zoning bylaw, we have a defense against a developer, against the state. We have an arguable, defendable position. And I really think it's important that the FinCom understand this is not a discussion about should we or shouldn't we. Where do we want to do it is a valid discussion, but we have to do this to comply with the law that the state told us to do. We can't just not do it because it doesn't fit with our town. You don't just comply with laws you can't afford to pay the penalty for. It's the law. We have to do this. I'm sorry for being a little like this, but it's frustrating to hear that the implications that maybe we don't have to do this.
I think that was a passionate statement, Chris, and I appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Could I just give some numbers on the schools that might put it a little bit more in perspective? So we have 450 units of multifamily housing at University Station. When those units were originally developed, we had a fiscal analysis done, and the prediction was that there would be between 71 and 75 school-age children coming out of those 450 units. As of today, there are 51 children coming out of those units, and those children are they run the gamut from pre-kindergarten straight up through high school. Of those units, so we have 450 units with 51 children. What's being proposed to be rezoned here, the addition of just the Everett Street property, because the University Station properties are already fully developed. So you just look at the Everett Street property, it could accommodate up to 102 units at 15 units per acre density as required in the state law. So if we looked at that 102 units, that would be, and compared it to the numbers that we have here, that would be fewer than 20 school children that would live in those units. So if we have 51 units for 450 apartments, even if some of these apartments are larger than those apartments, and we believe 10 of the apartments would be 3-bedroom apartments, we're talking about probably fewer than 20 children. That is fewer children than currently are in the subdivision that Mr. Paff mentioned off of Canton Street. So it's 100 apartments is about the equivalent of 10 single-family homes in number of children.
Thanks, Nora.
Thank you,
Angela,
Nora.
you have a question.
Yep, hi. So first, I'd like to say that I commend the planning board for trying to get out in front of this. I mean, as you stated, it's something that has to happen, right? So we have to comply. So my question is that, okay, we're looking to zone 16.5 acres, right? And according to the guidelines, the acreage is much more. So are we thinking that this is going to buy us time? Because it doesn't sound like we have a plan to be in compliance by, you know, the deadline, which is going to be December, right, of 2023.
If I could answer that, we do believe it will buy us time and also show that we are attempting to comply. We believe that this proposal is fully compliant with the letter and the spirit of the law, but not with the draft guidelines. We don't know what the final guidelines will be. We're hopeful that the final guidelines will require far less than 50 acres of development. We hope it'll be very close to the 16.5 that are being proposed for Westwood. And if it's not, we'll come back with the next stage. So when the planning board looked at all the areas around town, they looked at other properties as well that could be added to this zone. They looked at other properties on Washington Street. They looked at a property off of Blue Hill Drive. They looked at properties all around a half a mile of the train stations. So there are other options, but they don't want to do more than they believe is necessary to take that first step. So they're proposing a tiered approach. At this town meeting, they're recommending the addition of these 16.5 acres, including just that 6.7 acres on Everett Street that's really ripe for development. And then see what happens when the final guidelines come out. And if they require Westwood to do more than 16.5 acres, then they'll take a closer look at all those other properties that are potential additions to this zone. They're doing it that way so as not to do too much too soon, but to do enough to show that we are complying with the letter and the spirit of the law itself, if not the guidelines. And I believe that we have advice of town council that will put us in a much better position than if we do nothing.
So I want to recognize town council, who's had his hand up for a little bit. And I think, Mr. O'Hearn, if you could comment on the law and the compliance to the law.
So there are several comments I'd like to make. The first of which, this is not easy. And this has been a robust discussion, and I can tell everyone has the best interest of the town at heart. I just would like to address several concerns that I've heard. And the first one is, are we over zoning? Well, given the draft guidelines right now calling for 50 total acres, or at least two overlay district of 25 acres, I think the chance that we're over zoning is de minimis at best. 2 of the properties that we're zoning this way are already fully developed within the last 5 years. So there's not going to be any changes to the town. The only place there's potential changes is on that parcel on Everett Street, which is in deplorable condition, in my opinion. So this may be an opportunity to take that blighted property and develop it in a way that helps the town. And I agree with Nora's assessment by comparison for the number of school-age children who we might get out of there, but we haven't done a good financial analysis on that. And that would be something a developer could have to do from the planning board's perspective. So that's point one. My second point is, I always believe that if you're in a situation where things are potentially litigated, could become litigation or controversial, you're always better to be more reasonable than your opponents. So if we just say, no, we're not doing anything, I believe that will weaken our position in negotiations going forward, or if there is some kind of potential litigation. No one knows what tomorrow will bring, but we are at over 10% of our affordable housing stock will have zoned 16 acres to comply with this law. That puts us in a much better position to negotiate, to not have to expand to the full 25 and 50. And I don't think 25 and 50, given some of the comments I've heard from my colleagues, is really going to last this round of public opinion, but I could be wrong about that, and I'll fully admit that. So I just want you to think about it, not in terms of let's hold on and wait and see what the final rules are before we make our play. I think this is a reasonable play right now to put us in a reasonable position to defend our actions against any kind of person or entity who would say we are not being reasonable and you are not in compliance with the law. And I realize we have some time, but that time can move very quickly should we not do anything right now. So I hear and understand all your concerns. I ask that you think about it from that perspective. Thank you.
All right, Christina, one more question.
More of a statement. No one on this finance committee wants to be in violation of the law. We all are seeking to fully comply with the law. What we want to understand is how we comply with the law when the guidelines are final. We can't comply with the law without the guidelines being finalized. So that's really where my concern lies.
I think that I just want to, as a lawyer, just make a point. And that is that the law is what we must comply with. The state then issues guidelines and regulations as it relates to the law. So we must comply with the law. What they're proposing to us complies with the law. How the state issues its guidelines and its regulations that inform us more about how we should comply is a process that takes time, not just with this law, but with every law. I mean, I work a lot with legislatures and they talk about the sausage of making regulations. It takes time. It is not an easy process. So what they're talking to you about is complying with the law. All right. Yeah. Well, let me just, we have one more comment from a member of FinCom, and then David, I'm going to get to you. So we have one more FinCom comment, and that is Jim, I believe.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of take a tangent. Abby, you sent over a copy of the proposed law, or the zoning article, and I'm looking at section 9.95, and you have a list of professions that would be permitted. And I was just curious, 9.9.5.7, institutional use. What's your definition of institutional use?
Right, that is the list of the allowed uses in the zoning district.
Correct.
We do also on the first page, this was pointed out at our public hearing as well. So we did add a definition for institutional uses on the first page of the zoning article. It's the use of land, buildings, or structures for public or social purposes, not for commercial or industrial, but may include government, religious, educational, charitable, philanthropic, or similar uses not otherwise defined in the bylaw.
Okay,
So
you got it. I missed that one. Okay.
Oh, so it's,
and then 9.9.5.9 personal services. What's that one?
that is defined in the existing bylaw in section 2. Personal services are things like hair salons, nail salons, where you're performing a service on people. So
Okay.
we did include, this was mentioned earlier about not getting information. I wanted to add that we did provide the 28-page zoning article as well as a 4-page memorandum last week that outlined everything that you saw tonight. We've done this presentation multiple times. This is we've come to this committee twice and done a very similar presentation. We just moved some slides around and took some more images, but all the information was provided in your packet last week.
Okay, anything else from FinCom members? And then I want to recognize Mr. Atkins.
Thanks. So there's a couple of questions I wanted to address. Who wants this, and is the law finalized? And as picking up, Diane, what you were saying, the law is clear and is finalized. It's the implementation that is a question. And kind of picking up on what Pat was saying, I mean, we have made a really good faith effort to implement what we believe the intent of the law to be, by choosing a small step forward. And so I think that helps to inform the discussion. If we just stood back and did nothing, then there's no one who's proposing anything, and they'll just take the regulations and say, oh, 50 acres, oh, maybe it should be 40 acres, or maybe it should be 100 acres. Why don't we just draw a circle around every train station and declare that to be the zone? No, we've proposed, we said, what would we want to see? What would be a desirable outcome? And we looked at that property in particular on Everett Street and said, this might be an opportunity that this could grow into something useful. Now, who wants this? Well, who wants, this is something to be determined in terms of what might be built. We don't control what gets built, but a lot of people want an alternative. They want alternatives so they don't have to leave town to find an apartment that they would want to live in. When people sell their homes and then they find out, oh, well, I'm just gonna have to buy the same thing again for another $1 million or something. So there's a lot of people who want alternatives to the expensive single family homes in Westwood. So I think and then we've heard that through a lot of discussions of like affordable housing and everything, and just all the issues of people wanting to downsize, but they can't. And so there's a need for more options. Now, whether this exact thing here is what they're asking for, maybe not, I don't know, but this is what we're trying to do, is be a part of the larger solution. The legislature identified a problem. And if you really want to look at this from the statewide perspective, this is they're reforming zoning to deal with the fact that it's been impossible to get multifamily housing developed because it's resisted by towns, by not in my backyard and all that kind of stuff. So, it's the legislature is trying to do something that would never pass individually, that hasn't passed individually. And so when we look at that and we say, well, there is a housing problem, and how could we be a part of the solution in a way that is to the benefit not only of people who want to have more housing options, but to our town, we approached it in this way that Mr. Hertz was saying, like we have the existing properties there. They already are multifamily. Let's use that as one thing. And the density that's required by this is actually less than what that is. And then let's look at this place in town that fits the geographic criteria. What would we like to see happen there? And can we design a process where we maintain some control over that? So we have the EIDR process, we include an affordable housing component. We have the legislation here in our town, the guidelines, so that we're not rushing to implement something. We're not saying, oh my God, we've got to go find 50 acres and let's make it, build all the apartments you want. No, we've got a plan for what we imagined if 22 Everett Street could be developed into something better than it is now. Those guidelines we would have as a part of this. And so I think that whole process, it's a reasonable approach to try to meet the intent of this law and to shape the discussion so that if these guidelines, these state guidelines, they're not final, but we've proposed something. Maybe people look at this and say, Westwood's, this is pretty reasonable. Let's move close to what Westwood is doing, versus standing on the sidelines waiting for somebody to say, okay, let's split the difference. 25 acres is what you have to do, and you can't regulate it at all. So I think that's what we're trying to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris Pareda, do you have are you our last FinCom question on this matter?
Now, I wanted to move on to Article 2, if we're all
Yes.
done with Article 1.
Okay, please move on to Article 2.
Okay, so first of all, I want to commend Abby for the presentation. It was professionally put together and delivered, and it really did help to launch a very robust and very informative discussion. I commend the other members of the commission too for asking such probing questions. So congratulations, Abby, on going to Lexington. They will be well served by having you there. So on the second article, the solar article, my only concern is that I would much prefer you not to mention any specific square footage for non-mounted arrays. The minute you put a square footage in there, you invite somebody to come in and with a proposal that's just under that square footage in order to avoid the more onerous review that the larger ones are proposed to have. So you don't get very many non-mounted proposals in the first place. Abby went through and confirmed that for me. I didn't think we would, but I would much prefer to see this proposal not mention any square footage at all, just like you removed the wattage figure at your last meeting, I believe it was. Remove the square footage and just have the first review done by the town planner. And then that person can then decide whether or not an environmental review is adequate with notice to the abutters, or whether a full planning board review or an hearing is necessary with notice to the abutters. So that would be a much preferred way, in my view, to approach the difference, the dichotomy between a mounted array and a non-mounted array. Because you could have some non-mounted arrays in somebody's backyard that is very, very, very onerous. Or you could have what typically is seen, something like a large swimming pool that isn't so onerous. So that would be my only concern and my suggestion.
Okay. Yep, the planning board can consider that at their continued hearing next week. You know, the reason they came up with the 10,000 square feet is we looked at all the applications we've received. The 10,000 square foot size, that's something that you would most likely only ever see at a solar farm or a commercial property. So that's where the planning board was looking at. That would be one that you'd want to have a public hearing and a public process with at the planning board. The under that, you know, the average size of anyone on their own property looking to do solar is at you know, much smaller, under 1,000 square feet. But the planning board can take another look at it at their continued hearing next week.
If I could just add to that, Chris, I think the reason we've come up with a threshold is it's a defendable position. It's not subjective to the town planner and whether or not he or she decides to launch the more deeper process. It's an understandable unintended consequence. I could see someone presenting 9,950, but the process that you're saying they would avoid, truly, if you're setting up more than 10,000 square feet, this process is not onerous. It's administrative. It's really not something that's going to be denied. It's just going to involve a public review. That's it.
I appreciate your position, but in your fourth proposal, you have the building commissioner doing exactly that. So I don't see any difference between having the building commissioner make a first judgment on a proposal of an increase in a non-conforming structure, and having the town planner make a first cut at whether or not a solar panel needs to go to the planning board.
Understood.
Great. Okay, I think we might be ready to move to public comments, and we do have a bunch in the queue here. Jane, do you want to read them?
Sure.
Okay.
The first one is Brian Clinton. He's a resident of 44 Baker Street. In the interest of everyone's time, I want to lend my support to the planning board's Article 4. This will allow the building commissioner much needed discretion to help homeowners of pre-existing structures to make often much needed improvements to their homes. These are not always cosmetic in nature. In our case, we were denied a variance by the Westwood Zoning Board over 2 feet of front yard setback. We needed the 2 feet to accommodate my disabled 67-year-old mother-in-law who lives in our home by necessity, not by choice. Due to the restrictive nature of zoning and the handcuffs placed on the local zoning boards by state law, we were ineligible for zoning relief. This common sense article will grant the commission the authority to use zoning as a planning tool and not the weapon it feels like to Westwood families just looking to stay in place and make their home a true home for all the family members who live there, who live in it. I am on the call and can elaborate if needed. We have, and he continues, we have unsuccessfully pled our case to the zoning board and now to the planning board. I urge the Finance and Warrant Commission to favorably recommend this article for consideration at the 2022 Westwood Town Meeting. Thank you, Brian. The next person is Julia, is it Gervais? I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly, at 118 Holborn Street. The Westwood Environmental Action Committee, WEAC, is highly supportive of the solar zoning amendments as they remove obstacles for solar structures which do not exist for other structures and bring Westwood into compliance with state Massachusetts laws. Lou Rizzoli. Lou, would you please add your address in for me and then I'll come back to you. Nancy Hyde at 15 Martingale Lane. I would like to say the planning board has done an exceptional job working through the multifamily housing law put forth by the state, and they have been extremely transparent in their process. Jackie Keaveney, 22 Redwood Road. The MBTA law states in section quotes, determining sustainability for families with children, end of quotes, that no limits or restrictions can be put on the number of bedrooms, number of occupants, size of bedrooms, and size of each unit in the zoning. So this planning board zoning proposal doesn't have any restrictions on that, correct? In order to follow the letter of the law. Would someone like to speak to that?
Yes.
Go right ahead, Abby.
Okay. Yes, that's right. There's no restrictions on age limits or number of bedrooms, but we do have a provision that says 10% of the housing has to have at least 2 bedrooms, because that's consistent with family supportive housing described in the law. So we wanted to make sure there's that minimum.
Is it three bedrooms, Abby? Or 2 bedrooms?
Yes, 10% has to have at least 3 bedrooms, yes.
And Jane, we do have Lou Rizzoli's address.
Yes, I have it. I just didn't know if they were finished. Lou Rizzoli at 120 Arcadia Road. I'm just going to go back up to the beginning for Lou. Sorry. Lou Rizzoli asked, planning board gave much opportunity to all people to speak on proposing housing committees had input. I remember the problem about when the developer proposed in late 1980s 300 condos where Chase Estates is, because we didn't comply with 10% affordable housing. It took us years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get Chase Estates to 100 single family housing. Let's not be vulnerable again. I totally support the planning board article. I am the president of WAHA, but speaking just for myself. And Lou is saying he's in support of planning board article 1. We also have Peter Kuzon.
Jane?
Yes?
Can I just want to, I know we've been on a long time, but I want to thank Mrs. Rizzoli for something she just mentioned. When she made her comment, she ended it.
Rizzoli.
I'm sorry?
Lou Rizzoli, yeah.
She made, I'm sorry. She ended her comment saying that she was just speaking on behalf of herself, not for anything else. And I think that's a valuable thing. When people serve on committees, they should be giving, when they give their opinion, it should be their personal, not on behalf of their committee. I think that's a very crucial thing. So I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, no worries, George. Thank you for your comment. I have Peter Cuzzolo at 17 Sexton Ave. He originally says, I would like to comment about Article 4, and then he said I was unable to call in. Yes, please feel free to just type in the chat here, whatever your comment is, and we'll be happy to read it. Peter. We'll look for that. And I think that's it right now. We just
Okay.
have waiting to hear from Peter.
So,
Diane, can we loop back? While we're waiting to hear from Peter, Tom Kilgariff, while we still have the planning board here before they close their public hearing, Tom Kilgariff had a comment that he wanted to make that I think Dave Atkins had made. So I don't know if we could loop back to Tom so we don't lose that.
oh, yeah, sorry, Tom. I didn't see that. My apologies. Jane always keeps me on track though.
Great. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Jane. I just wanted to circle back on a question that Mr. Atkins had posted earlier on the chat. He had mentioned that he thought that it would be reasonable to ask the town what the cost would be, estimated cost would be for if the town adopted 41C.5. And I just wanted to mention that in my asking the petitioner, I think it's a fair question of any petitioner to ask cost of their proposed article. But I would also mention that Pam Dukeman has addressed that in the past. And the challenge is that the answer was, I don't want to put words in Pam's mouth and Pam's back, thank you. But I'll paraphrase. I think that the answer was that we don't know, and there was no way for the town to know. And then part of that is that's I think that was also part or the major reason why only 2 of 351 towns had adopted that rule. So anyway, that was the deal on the town and not knowing, no way to estimate the cost.
Okay.
Thank
Can I
you,
just
Dave.
add one quick follow-up to that, Tom? You're
Please.
exactly right. We're not able to estimate it, and that's why communities have not adopted it, because you're taking on something that you don't know what the impact will be. And the things we don't have is we don't have income information for all of our residents. So if you all think yourselves individually, you don't submit anything to the town with your income. So we don't have any information on who would qualify. And then again, that exemption is based on the average home value of your town for that year, not the individual's home value, but what the community's average home value each year, which is calculated late in the tax rate setting process each year and can change. Our home value has been rising tremendously because all of our new housing stock is coming in at a very high level. So we just don't have the information to give you to say what would it cost, how much would it be, who'd be eligible, how many would be eligible. We don't have that data.
That's great. And thanks again, Pam. And I just wanted to circle back on that, Diane, because not all residents attend every FinCom meeting, so that not everyone on this call may have heard that answer in prior meetings. So I just wanted, for transparency's sake, and just to, make sure that it doesn't appear as though we're, avoiding a question or anything like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So Mr. Caruso says it's too lengthy to put in a chat. So I guess that's where we are with that. So the planning board, thank you. I just think this presentation was phenomenal. Abby, a wonderful job. Thank you. Other people have said it. I want to second it. To FinCom members, thank you for a really robust and fabulous discussion. We will continue it when we go do the votes. But thank you to all of you. And I think you have some business that you need to do before we can go on.
Yes. First off, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the FinCom for listening to us. I hope we have articulated our position I want to apologize for my impassioned plea earlier. I didn't mean to get quite as riled as I did, but we've put a lot of time and energy into this, and the planning board believes that our Article 1 puts the town in the best possible position moving forward. Still flexible, but in the most defendable position moving forward. That being said, I will take a motion to continue this hearing till our next meeting, March 8th at 7 p.m. via Zoom.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? We'll take a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
I vote aye as well to continue. So our planning board meeting, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call vote. Ellen? I didn't hear you, sorry.
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. We are adjourned. Thank you so much, FinCom.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
All
you.
right, so this was a great public hearing. I think, am I correct, Jane, in that we're bringing the public hearing to a close? Am I right about that?
Up to you, Diane. Next on our agenda we need to approve the February 2022 meeting minutes. And you also need to make a decision on whether we will continue our public hearing till tomorrow night. And any other new business that you have or members have, Diane, that's where we are right now.
Okay, I do not believe we need to continue this public hearing till tomorrow night. And unless I see someone raising their hand vigorously, I think we're going to say we do not need to continue this public hearing till tomorrow night. And so then, Jane, is it true that we close the public hearing and then go on to approve the minutes, or no?
No, we can keep the
Oh,
public
okay.
hearing of the minutes. We can,
Okay, okay. So can I get a motion to approve the February 22 minutes?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second,
George and
Second.
okay.
Great.
Are there any comments on the minutes? There are no comments on the minutes.
Yes, there are comments.
Yes, there are.
A comment on the minutes. One of the documents that was sent out was it appeared to be a Miss Jean transcription of my comments on the senior articles from an earlier session. And I was surprised at that, actually. That transcription contained quite a number of errors. And I was not given the opportunity to review it before it was sent. So that came as a surprise to me.
Okay, do you have a motion to amend the minutes?
I'm not moving to amend. I'm just expressing an observation.
Okay.
that document was not part of the February
Minutes.
minutes.
No. Okay, can we get a vote on the minutes, please?
So
Jane,
moved.
we've got the
Yes.
motions. Jane, you want to call the vote?
Yes. Bill,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
George H.,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Peter,
No.
Caitlin,
Yes. Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes, sorry.
no worries. I'm sorry, Christina,
Jane, I believe she's knocked out. She's in the
oh,
comment section asking to be let back in. Pardon me.
Chris, thank you, Patrick.
Yes,
Chris,
yes.
Sarita, thank you. And Christina, I'm moving you back in right now. Thanks, Pat. And Alex,
Yes.
and then Christina, are you back with us?
I am back.
Great. Are you, can you go
Yes,
to?
I approve.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That is done.
Okay, so here's the scoop as I understand it. And Jane's going to correct me if I'm wrong, and I think Mr. Ahern's even still with us. So we, as the commission, can choose to vote on these warrant articles at this point anytime we want. So if we, for instance, felt like we had expressed all of our comments and all of our thoughts, we could move to vote on the select board warrant articles, right? We could do that. We could do that at our next meeting, or we can hold all of our votes to our very last public hearing, right? So next meeting is the presentation from the school board subcommittee and the municipal subcommittee, right? Jane?
Yes.
So it may be, and I'm asking you to think about it, it may be that, you know, we feel at that point that, yeah, we could take a vote on the select board articles because we've heard them now a couple of times. We've already asked our questions. And so at that point we would deliberate, you know, people would have a chance to make more comments. We'd deliberate and then we would vote. So I'm just laying that out there as a possibility. We could do that. And so Jane, go ahead.
We would always close the public hearing before we began deliberation.
Yes. So I'm not suggesting that we deliberate tonight, right? I'm suggesting, I'm just laying it out for the commission that that is a possibility if we feel like we are ready to do so at our next meeting. At the end of the subcommittee presentations, we could deliberate and take a vote. So I'm just putting that out there. I want you to think about it, because if you feel ready to do it, I sort of feel like it might be a good idea, because then our last meeting, of course, which is where we have the budget articles and then we do all of our deliberations and votes. That is, you know, I guess I keep saying this, and so I'm a repetitive person here. It's going to be a long meeting, I fear. So anyway, putting it out there for people to think about, and then we can revisit it if we feel like we want to next week. It's not a decision I would make as chair. It's a question I'm putting out there for all of you. Okay, with that statement, I think we are ready to adjourn if anybody else has anything. Okay, Jane.
Yes, I need a motion and then a second, Diana. We can.
Motion to adjourn.
Who was
Second.
that? Jim?
Jim?
Yes, and second was?
Bill?
Thank you, Bill. Are we ready? Bill,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Georgelle,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
Chris Pareda,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
We're going to adjourn at 8:50.
Thank you, guys. Have a great
Good night,
night.
all.
Thanks. Good night.